Sarah Chen stared at the divorce papers scattered across her kitchen table, the familiar weight of her wedding ring foreign on her finger after 8 years. The house felt cavernous around her, too big, too quiet, too full of memories that now tasted bitter. Michael's coffee mug still sat in the sink from that morning, the morning he'd casually mentioned over scrambled eggs that he was leaving her for Jessica, his 24-year-old marketing assistant at the firm. It's not about age, he'd said, not meeting her eyes as he straightened his tie. Jessica just gets my ambitions. She supports my vision for the future. The irony wasn't lost on Sarah. She'd been the one with the marketing degree from Northwestern, the one who turned down 3 promotions and a dream job in New York so Michael could establish his career at his father's construction company. She'd been the one crafting brilliant campaigns from their home office while he played golf with clients, building his reputation on strategies she'd whispered to him over dinner. The courtroom had been worse than the initial betrayal. Michael's family, the Richardsons with their old money and older prejudices, had descended like vultures in expensive suits. His mother, Patricia, had worn her pearls like armor and her disdain like perfume, choking the air around Sarah with condescension. Really, Michael, you're being quite generous with the settlement, Patricia had stage whispered loud enough for half the courtroom to hear. After all, what has she actually contributed? Some people just aren't cut out for real success. Michael's brother David had smirked from the gallery. Maybe now she'll learn what actual work looks like, instead of playing around with her little computer projects. The little computer projects had generated over $2 million in revenue for Richardson Construction, but Sarah's lawyer had advised against making waves. Let's just get through this, he'd said, don't give them ammunition. So she'd sat silent while they carved up 8 years of her life, awarding Michael the house they'd chosen together, the savings account she'd fed with freelance work while supporting his career, even the dog they'd rescued from the shelter on their 2nd anniversary. She'd walked away with her personal belongings, a modest alimony payment, and a reputation in ruins. The Whisper campaign had started immediately. At the grocery store, former neighbors suddenly found their phones fascinating when she approached. Professional contacts stopped returning her calls. A consulting opportunity she'd been certain about vanished after the client mentioned they'd heard concerning things about her reliability. Michael's sister Emma had been particularly vicious at the local country club, where Sarah had foolishly shown up for what she thought was a farewell lunch with mutual friends. Honestly, I think Michael dodged a bullet, Emma had announced to their table of 6. Some women just can't handle being married to successful men. They get jealous, resentful. Poor Michael tried so hard to make it work. The final insult had come 3 weeks later, when Sarah discovered that Richardson Construction's latest marketing campaign, the one earning them the biggest municipal contract in the company's history, was lifted directly from a presentation she'd created for Michael the year before. Her ideas, her strategy, her late nights and weekend research, now generating millions under someone else's name while she lived in a studio apartment and counted every dollar. Sarah closed the divorce papers and looked around her tiny new kitchen. The Richardsons thought they'd won. They thought they'd successfully erased her, reduced her to nothing more than an embarrassing footnote in Michael's story of success. They had no idea what they'd actually done. They'd freed her. The discovery came by accident, buried in a box of old files Michael had forgotten in the garage. Sarah had been packing the last of her belongings when she found the manila folder wedged behind a stack of tax returns. Inside were bank statements she'd never seen before, statements showing regular transfers from Richardson Construction's accounts to a personal account she didn't recognize. Her hands trembled as she cross-referenced the dates. Every transfer coincided with Michael's business trips with Jessica, dinners at 5-star restaurants, weekend getaways to Napa, designer jewelry purchases, all funded by money siphoned from his father's company. Michael hadn't just been having an affair, he'd been stealing to finance it, but that wasn't the worst part. As Sarah dug deeper into the forgotten files, she found email printouts that made her stomach turn. Messages between Michael and his family, dating back 2 years, discussing her problematic independence and strategizing ways to manage the Sarah situation. She's getting too confident, Patricia had written. That New York job offer has gone to her head. We need to remind her where her priorities should be. David's response was even more calculated. Leave it to me, I'll have a word with Jim Morrison at Hendrickson Associates. Make sure they know she's not as reliable as she seems. Morrison had been one of her biggest potential clients, a deal that had mysteriously evaporated after what he'd called concerning feedback from industry contacts. Now she knew why. The emails revealed a systematic campaign spanning months. Michael had been actively sabotaging her professional relationships while playing the supportive husband at home. He'd poisoned potential clients against her, spread rumors about her work ethic, and even convinced mutual friends that her success was somehow threatening their marriage. Michael says Sarah's been struggling with some personal issues. Emma had written to the wife of a potential business partner. Apparently she's been unreliable lately, missing deadlines. He's trying to be supportive, but it's affecting his own work. The lies were so elaborate, so coordinated, that Sarah had to sit down as the full scope of their betrayal sank in. They hadn't just divorced her, they'd spent 2 years systematically destroying her reputation and isolating her professionally, ensuring she'd have nowhere to turn when they finally discarded her. But the final blow came in the last email, dated just a week before Michael had asked for the divorce. It was from his father, Charles Richardson, to the entire family. The municipal contract presentation is solid. Sarah's strategies are exactly what we need to secure this deal. Once we have it locked in, Michael can proceed with his exit plan. By then, we'll have extracted everything useful from her, and she'll be too damaged professionally to pose any threat to our reputation. Sarah's vision blurred with rage. They'd used her, discarded her, and celebrated their cleverness in doing so, but they'd made one crucial mistake in their arrogance. They'd left evidence, and Sarah Chen had built her career on turning information into power. Sarah spent the next 3 days in her studio apartment, surrounded by printouts, laptop screens, and legal pads covered in her careful handwriting. She'd always been methodical. It's what made her brilliant at marketing strategy, but now that precision would serve a different purpose. The evidence folder sat at the center of her makeshift war room like a nuclear weapon. Michael's embezzlement totaled nearly $180,000 over 18 months, all traceable through bank records he'd been careless enough to keep. But Sarah knew that rushing to expose him would only result in a he-said-she-said battle where the Richardsons' money and connections would inevitably win. She needed to be smarter, strategic, patient. First, she researched Richardson Construction with the thoroughness of a CIA analyst. The company was bidding on the Riverside Municipal Complex project, a $15 million contract that would transform the family's regional business into a major player. The proposal deadline was 6 weeks away, and they were the presumed frontrunners, largely because of the marketing strategy Sarah had unknowingly provided them. But every business had vulnerabilities, and the Richardsons were no exception. Their recent expansion had stretched them thin financially. 3 smaller projects had gone over budget in the past year. Their insurance had been canceled and renewed twice due to safety violations. Most importantly, Charles Richardson's age and health were becoming concerns among industry insiders, concerns that could be amplified with the right whispers in the right ears. Sarah opened her laptop and began drafting her strategy in 3 phases. Phase 1 launched immediately. She registered Chen Strategic Consulting as an LLC, using her divorce settlement as seed money. Her first move was reaching out to Riverside Construction, Richardson's main competitor for the municipal contract. Sarah had met their CEO, Maria Santos, at industry events before Michael had systematically poisoned those waters. Sarah Chen, Maria's voice was cautious when she returned the call. I heard you were taking some time off. I was recovering from a learning experience, Sarah replied smoothly, and now I'm ready to put that education to work. I understand you're bidding on the municipal complex project. Within a week, Sarah was crafting a competing proposal for Riverside Construction, one that incorporated all her insights about the city's real priorities, insights the Richardsons had never bothered to gather because they assumed their connections guaranteed success. Phase 2 required more delicate maneuvering. Sarah began cultivating relationships with local journalists, particularly Amanda Foster from the Riverside Tribune's business section. She didn't pitch stories directly, instead she provided Amanda with background context about construction industry trends, slowly building trust while planting seeds about potential corruption in municipal contracts. It's interesting how family businesses sometimes blur the lines between company and personal expenses, Sarah mentioned during one of their coffee meetings. Speaking theoretically, of course. The successful ones maintain strict financial boundaries. The ones that, well, they usually don't stay successful for long. Simultaneously, Sarah was rebuilding her professional network. She reached out to former colleagues and clients, armed with a carefully crafted narrative about her divorce and career transition. She didn't bash Michael or his family, that would seem petty and unprofessional. Instead, she positioned herself as someone who'd made sacrifices for family and was now ready to focus fully on her career. I spent years putting my family first, which meant turning down some incredible opportunities, she told Robert Chen, a former Northwestern classmate now running his own marketing firm. The divorce was difficult, but it's given me clarity about what I really want to achieve. Robert's response was immediate. We've got 3 clients who could use your expertise. When can you start? Phase 3 was the most dangerous but potentially most devastating. Sarah began documenting everything about the Richardson family's business practices, their social connections, and their public image. She attended charity galas where she knew they'd be present, not to confront them, but to observe and gather intelligence. At the Riverside Children's Hospital fundraiser, she watched Patricia Richardson hold court with the city council members' wives, name-dropping her way through conversations about family values and community responsibility. Charles Richardson was working the room with practiced charm, his handshake firm and his smile calculated as he discussed the upcoming municipal project with obvious confidence. Michael was there too, Jessica clinging to his arm like an expensive accessory. Sarah felt a moment of satisfaction watching them. Jessica looked bored and slightly overwhelmed by the social complexity, while Michael seemed diminished somehow, less substantial than she remembered. He caught sight of Sarah across the room and quickly looked away, his discomfort visible even from a distance. But Sarah wasn't there for emotional satisfaction. She was there to gather intelligence, and the evening provided exactly what she needed. She overheard Charles Richardson assuring Councilman Williams that the municipal contract was practically guaranteed, given their family's long history of community service. She watched Patricia Richardson dismiss a question about project safety by laughing and saying, "Oh, we leave all those tedious details to the younger generation." Most importantly, she heard David Richardson complaining to his wife about their cash flow problems, mentioning that they'd had to get creative with some accounting to maintain their expansion timeline. By the end of 6 weeks, Sarah had accomplished more than she'd thought possible. Riverside Construction had submitted a superior proposal for the municipal contract, one that highlighted genuine community benefits rather than relying on family connections. 3 former clients had hired Chen Strategic Consulting for significant projects, and Sarah had built a comprehensive file on Richardson Construction's vulnerabilities that would make their downfall seem inevitable, rather than vindictive. The Richardsons still didn't know what was coming. They were about to find out that underestimating Sarah Chen had been the costliest mistake of their privileged lives. The first crack in the Richardson facade appeared on a Tuesday morning when Charles Richardson's phone rang with news that Riverside Construction had won the municipal contract. Sarah was in her new office, a modest but professional space she'd leased with her growing consulting income, when Amanda Foster called with the update. "Your instincts about corruption in municipal contracting were spot on," Amanda said. "Word is that the Richardson bid was technically solid but politically tone-deaf. The winning proposal focused on community impact and local hiring rather than family connections." Sarah allowed herself a small smile as she hung up. Within hours she knew the Richardson family would be in crisis mode, trying to understand how their guaranteed contract had slipped away. She didn't have to wait long. By Thursday, Patricia Richardson was making phone calls. "I don't understand what's happening," Sarah overheard Patricia telling someone at the country club, her voice carrying that particular strain of wealthy entitlement under pressure. "These people don't know what they're doing. Charles has served this community for 30 years. But the Richardsons' problems were just beginning. Sarah's careful cultivation of industry contacts was bearing fruit in ways they couldn't trace back to her. A safety inspector who'd been overlooked for years suddenly found his reports taken more serious. A former Richardson subcontractor, emboldened by rumors of the company's declining influence, filed a complaint about unpaid invoices. 3 different clients began asking pointed questions about project timelines and budget overruns. Sarah watched it all unfold with professional detachment, documenting each development like a marketing campaign's performance metrics. But she wasn't prepared for how vicious the Richardson family could be when cornered. The counterattack came through Michael, who apparently still had access to some of their mutual professional contacts. Sarah's phone rang on a Friday afternoon with bad news from Robert Chen. "I'm sorry, Sarah, but we need to pause the Morrison project," he said, his voice uncomfortable. "I got a call from someone who used to work with your ex-husband. They said there were some reliability issues, financial problems. I know it's probably not true, but with a client this size, we can't take risks." The lie was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its effectiveness. By Monday, 2 other projects had been postponed due to similar whispered concerns. Sarah realized that the Richardsons had decided to resurrect their old strategy of professional sabotage, but now they were being less subtle about it. Emma Richardson was particularly aggressive, spreading rumors through the country club circuit with the dedication of a full-time job. "I heard she's having some sort of breakdown," Emma told anyone who would listen. "Michael tried to protect her, but she's become vindictive, obsessed. You know how some women get after divorce?" The campaign might have worked if Sarah hadn't spent the past 2 months rebuilding her reputation with concrete results rather than social connections. When Maria Santos called to check on the rumors, Sarah was ready. "I appreciate you reaching out directly," Sarah told her. "As you can see from our Riverside construction project, my work speaks for itself. I think the source of these rumors is fairly obvious, and their timing coincides perfectly with my former in-laws losing a contract they expected to win." Maria's laugh was knowing. Professional jealousy disguised as personal concern. "We see it all the time, don't worry, your results with us have been exceptional." But the Richardsons weren't finished. David Richardson, apparently forgetting that his own business dealings weren't entirely clean, began making threats through intermediaries. Sarah's landlord received an anonymous tip about potential illegal business operations in her office space. Her insurance company got a call suggesting she might be a fraud risk. Someone even reported her car as abandoned in the grocery store parking lot, resulting in an embarrassing towing incident. Each petty attack only strengthened Sarah's resolve. She'd been playing defense, but it was time to go on the offense. Sarah scheduled a meeting with Amanda Foster, bringing a carefully prepared folder of information. She didn't present it as revenge. She positioned it as a public interest story about construction industry accountability. "I've been investigating some concerning patterns in local construction companies," she told Amanda, sliding documents across the coffee shop table. "Financial irregularities, safety violations, potential conflicts of interest. I think there's a story here about how municipal contracts really get awarded." Amanda's eyes lit up as she scanned the papers. "This is excellent investigative work. These bank records, how did you get access to these?" "Let's just say that sloppy record-keeping sometimes serves the public interest," Sarah replied. "I think you'll find the pattern of payments particularly interesting." Within a week, Amanda was making phone calls to city officials and industry insiders, asking questions about Richardson Construction's financial practices and recent project performance. The questions were professional and appropriate, but in a small business community, word traveled fast. Charles Richardson tried to contain the damage by calling in favors, but his influence wasn't what it used to be. The loss of the municipal contract had shaken confidence in the company's connections, and now there were whispers about financial problems and potential investigation. Michael, meanwhile, was becoming increasingly desperate. He started showing up at Sarah's office building, trying to corner her in the parking garage or lobby. His approaches were always carefully public. He wasn't stupid enough to risk a harassment charge, but his message was clear. "You need to stop whatever you're doing," he said during one encounter, his voice low and urgent. "This is affecting the whole family, my father's health, my mother's reputation. It's bigger than just us." Sarah looked at him with genuine curiosity. "I'm running a consulting business, Mike. What exactly do you think I should stop doing?" "Being successful? Don't play dumb. You know what you're doing." "I'm doing the same thing you did to me for 2 years," Sarah replied calmly. "I'm networking, building professional relationships, sharing information with people who might find it useful. Isn't that just good business?" Michael's face flushed with anger and something that might have been fear. "This isn't over." "You're right," Sarah agreed. "It's not." As he walked away, Sarah felt a surge of anticipation. The Richardsons were panicking, making mistakes, showing their true nature to people who had previously seen only their polished public facade. They were doing half her work for her, but the real test was coming. Charles Richardson's 65th birthday party was 3 weeks away, a lavish celebration designed to reassert the family's social dominance and business credibility. It would be attended by everyone who mattered in Riverside's business and political circle. Sarah had received an invitation, undoubtedly sent before the current hostilities began. She'd been planning to ignore it, but now she saw it differently. It was an opportunity, and Sarah Chen had built her career on recognizing opportunity. The Richardson estate was ablaze with lights on the evening of Charles's 65th birthday party. Valet shuttled luxury cars through the circular driveway, while guests in evening wear made their way toward the mansion's grand entrance. Sarah sat in her modest sedan across the street, watching the arrivals with the calm focus of a general surveying a battlefield. She'd spent 3 weeks preparing for this moment. Her black cocktail dress was elegant but not flashy. She wanted to blend in until the moment she chose to stand out. The leather portfolio beside her contained copies of every document she'd gathered: bank records, emails, safety violations, and most damning of all, the evidence of Michael's embezzlement and the family's systematic sabotage of her career. Amanda Foster was already inside, having arrived as the Tribune Society reporter. Sarah had briefed her thoroughly, but Amanda didn't know the full scope of what was about to unfold. Neither did Marcus Webb from Channel 7 News, who'd been tipped off about a potential story by an anonymous source. Sarah checked her phone one final time. The investigative pieces would publish online at midnight. Amanda's exposé on Richardson Construction's financial irregularities and safety violations, along with a detailed timeline of municipal contract irregularities. By morning, the story would be everywhere, but Sarah wanted the family to hear the truth from her first. She walked through the front door like she belonged there, her invitation held casually in her hand. The doorman barely glanced at it. He was too busy managing the crowd of Riverside's elite streaming into the marble foyer. The party was everything Patricia Richardson had intended, an ostentatious display of wealth and influence designed to reassure everyone that the recent business setbacks were merely temporary inconveniences. Ice sculptures gleamed under crystal chandeliers, while servers circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Sarah moved through the crowd like a ghost, invisible to people who'd written her off months ago. She listened to conversations, gathering final intelligence, watching the family dynamics play out in real time. Charles Richardson held court near the grand staircase, accepting congratulations and birthday wishes, with the practiced grace of someone accustomed to being the center of attention. He looked older than Sarah remembered, but still formidable in his custom tuxedo. Patricia Richardson was orchestrating the evening with military precision, directing staff and managing social hierarchies with subtle glances and meaningful smile. She wore diamonds that caught the light with every gesture, a walking advertisement for the family's continued prosperity. Michael stood with Jessica near the bar, both looking slightly uncomfortable. Jessica seemed overwhelmed by the social complexity, while Michael kept scanning the crowd nervously. Sarah wondered if he suspected she might appear. Emma and David Richardson worked the room with their spouses, each couple representing a different aspect of the family's public image. Emma the social butterfly, David the serious businessman, all of them playing their roles in the carefully constructed Richardson mythology. Sarah positioned herself near the string quartet and waited. At precisely 9 o'clock, as Charles Richardson raised his champagne glass to address his guests, Sarah stepped forward. "Excuse me," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the suddenly quiet room. "I have something to add to the celebration." The reaction was immediate. Patricia's face went white, then flushed red. Michael dropped his champagne glass, the crystal shattering against the marble floor. Charles Richardson's smile froze as every head in the room turned toward Sarah. "Sarah Chen," she said, introducing herself to the confused guests. "I used to be married to Michael Richardson. Some of you may remember me." Amanda Foster was already moving closer, her phone discreetly recording. Marcus Webb was doing the same from across the room. "I want to thank the Richardson family," Sarah continued, opening her portfolio with deliberate calm. "They've taught me so much over the past year, about loyalty, about integrity, about what happens when people mistake cruelty for cleverness." "You need to leave," Patricia hissed, stepping forward. "This is a private party." "Oh, but I was invited," Sarah replied, holding up her invitation. "And I have such interesting news to share, about financial fraud, about systematic harassment, about how this family has been stealing from their own company to fund affairs while destroying the careers of anyone who threatens their fragile egos." The room erupted in whispers. Charles Richardson was trying to signal security, but Sarah had positioned herself perfectly, surrounded by guests and reporters, impossible to remove without creating an even bigger scene. "These are serious accusations," Charles said, his voice carrying the authority of decades in business, "made by a bitter ex-wife with obvious motivations. You're absolutely right about my motivation, Sarah agreed. I'm motivated by 18 months of embezzled funds that Michael used to wine and dine his affair partner. I'm motivated by 2 years of professional sabotage orchestrated by this family to isolate and destroy me. I'm motivated by the theft of my marketing strategies, which you used to bid on municipal contracts while calling me a failure who wasn't cut out for success. She began distributing copies of documents to nearby guests, her movements calm and methodical, bank records showing systematic theft, email chains proving coordinated harassment, safety violations covered up to maintain profit margins. Everything documented, everything verified. Michael finally found his voice. She's lying. She's having some kind of breakdown. Am I? Sarah turned to face him directly. Then explain these bank transfers, Michael. Explain why company funds were used for your romantic getaway. Explain why your family coordinated a campaign to destroy my professional relationships while stealing my work. Jessica, who had been looking increasingly horrified, suddenly spoke up. What romantic getaways? Michael, what is she talking about? The crack in their united front was immediate and devastating. Jessica wasn't just the other woman, she was another victim of Michael's lies. She'd had no idea about the embezzlement, and her public realization was written across her face in real time. You told me that money came from your trust fund, Jessica said, her voice rising. You said your family approved of our relationship. Patricia Richardson looked like she might faint. The carefully constructed narrative of family unity was collapsing in front of Riverside's most influential people. David Richardson tried to take control. These are fabricated documents. We'll be pursuing criminal charges for harassment and defamation. Please do, Sarah replied smoothly. I'm sure the FBI's white-collar crime division will be very interested in your financial records. In fact, I believe they already are. That was a bluff, but it landed like a physical blow. Charles Richardson grabbed his chest, his face going gray. Patricia screamed as her husband collapsed, and suddenly the party turned into chaos. As paramedics worked on Charles Richardson, and guests fled the scene in confusion and embarrassment, Sarah found herself face to face with Michael one last time. You've destroyed everything, he said, his voice broken. My father might die, the business is ruined. Was your revenge worth all this? Sarah looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in months. She saw fear, shame, and something that might have been recognition of her strength. For just a moment, she felt something that wasn't quite pity but wasn't satisfaction either. This isn't revenge, Michael, she said quietly. This is consequences. There's a difference. She walked out of the Richardson mansion and into the night, leaving behind the wreckage of a family that had underestimated the woman they'd tried to erase. Behind her, sirens wailed and reporters gathered, drawn by the scent of a story that would dominate local headlines for weeks. Sarah Chen had learned something important that night. The best revenge wasn't about destroying others, it was about refusing to let them destroy you. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the floor-to-ceiling windows of her new corner office, watching the morning sun paint Riverside's skyline in shades of gold. Chen's strategic consulting had grown from a one-woman operation to a team of 12, with clients ranging from municipal governments to Fortune 500 companies, seeking her expertise in crisis management and reputation recovery. The irony wasn't lost on her that her greatest professional success had grown from the ashes of her personal destruction. The Richardson family's downfall had been swift and comprehensive. Charles Richardson had survived his heart attack but faced federal charges for tax evasion and fraud. The FBI investigation that Sarah had bluffed about became very real when Amanda Foster's reporting caught the attention of federal prosecutors. Richardson Construction had declared bankruptcy within 3 months, unable to survive the combination of legal fees, contract cancellations, and the complete erosion of their reputation. Michael had been sentenced to 18 months in federal prison for embezzlement, though he'd ultimately served only 10 months due to cooperation with prosecutors. Jessica had left him before the trial even began, moving back to Chicago with a story that made her something of a cautionary tale in young professional circles. Patricia Richardson had been the most resilient, channeling her energy into maintaining what remained of the family's social standing. She'd sold the mansion and most of their assets to pay legal fees, moving into a modest condo that would have horrified her former self. But she still attended charity events when she could afford the tickets, her chin held high despite the whispers that followed her. Emma and David had distanced themselves from the family business and their parents' legal troubles, but the stain of association had damaged their own career. David's consulting firm had lost most of its clients, while Emma's husband had quietly asked for a separation after his law firm suggested the Richardson connection was becoming professionally problematic. Sarah felt a complex mix of emotions about their fate. The vindication was real and satisfying, but so was the recognition that she'd played a role in genuine human suffering. Charles Richardson, despite his arrogance and cruelty, was still someone's father and grandfather. Patricia's public humiliation was complete and devastating, even if it was largely self-inflicted. But Sarah had learned to live with complexity. The alternative, allowing their cruelty to go unchallenged, would have been its own form of moral failure. Her personal life had found an unexpected equilibrium as well. She'd been dating Marcus Webb, the Channel 7 reporter who'd covered the Richardson story for 4 months now. Their relationship had begun professionally but evolved into something deeper, built on mutual respect for each other's integrity and work ethic. "You know what I love about you," Marcus had told her over dinner the previous week. "You never apologize for being successful. You never make yourself smaller to make other people comfortable." It was a lesson she'd learned the hard way, but it had transformed her understanding of her own worth. The phone buzzed, interrupting her reflection. Her assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Sarah, you have a call on line 2. It's Michael Richardson." Sarah stared at the blinking light for a long moment. Michael had tried to contact her several times since his release from prison, but she'd ignored his attempt. She wasn't sure what he could possibly have to say that would matter to her now. Curiosity won out over caution. She picked up the phone. "Sarah." His voice was different, quieter, stripped of the confidence she remembered. "Thank you for taking my call. What do you want, Michael?" I needed to tell you something. I've been in therapy, trying to understand how I became the person who could do what I did to you, and I realize I never actually acknowledged what you accomplished." Sarah said nothing, waiting. "You're brilliant," he continued, his voice gaining strength. "You always were. I think part of me knew that, and was threatened by it. When you started getting opportunities, when your career was taking off, I felt diminished. Instead of being proud of you, I was jealous, and my family fed into that jealousy, because they saw you as a threat to their control over me. Is there a point to this, Michael? The point is that you were right about everything. You deserved better than what we gave you. You deserved support, not sabotage. And what you built after we tried to destroy you, it's incredible. You're incredible." Sarah found herself unexpectedly moved, not by his words but by the recognition of how far she'd traveled from the person who would have needed to hear them. "I appreciate the apology," she said finally, "but I need you to understand something. I didn't succeed to prove you wrong. I succeeded because that's who I am, with or without your recognition." "I know," Michael said quietly. "That's what makes it so impressive." After she hung up, Sarah sat in her office chair, processing the conversation. There had been a time when Michael's acknowledgement of her abilities would have meant everything to her. Now it felt like validation she no longer needed. Her computer chimed with a new email notification. It was from the Riverside Women's Professional Network, confirming her keynote speech for their annual conference next month. The title of her presentation was "Rebuilding After Betrayal, a Strategic Approach to Professional Recovery." Sarah smiled, remembering her original title suggestion, "Welcome Home, Failure, How They Regretted Every Snarky Remark After My Divorce." Her assistant had diplomatically suggested something more professional, but the sentiment remained. Sarah had come home, not to the life she'd planned, but to the person she was always meant to be, strong, successful, and absolutely unapologetic about both. The Richardson family had tried to write her story for her, casting her as the discarded wife, the professional failure, the woman who just wasn't cut out for success. Instead, she'd written her own ending, and it was a bestseller.